Today, we're cutting through some pretty confusing headlines to look at the real strain on the U.S. economy.
Right. What we found is, frankly, a stark contrast between a seemingly good top-line number and some deep structural pain underneath.
So, our mission for you today is to unpack the current reality, what's actually happening in the U.S. business environment.
We're moving past those simple GDP reports.
Exactly. We want to analyze how three big forces are interacting. You've got aggressive trade policy, weakening consumer demand, and then this unprecedented government crisis situation.
The goal is for you to walk away understanding not just what's happening, but why it actually matters across different industries.
hmm And the fundamental paradox, the thing we really have to wrestle with here is this. How did the economy post, a pretty significant 3.8% GDP rebound in Q2?
Yet at the same time, the manufacturing and industrial sector is struggling. I mean, an 8-month decline. And the risk to the whole labor market seems genuinely heightened. How do those things coexist?
Well, this is where looking at all the sources together becomes so illuminating. They really reveal a persistent pattern of stress.
Okay.
And it seems concentrated across at least 12 specific vital industries. The pain points are real. And we've actually pulled direct quotes from purchasing managers in those sectors.
The people right there on the ground.
Exactly. The people living this environment day to day. And their words illustrate just how these big macro pressures are playing out, on the factory floor and in the supply chain.
Okay, so let's start by analyzing that macro volatility then. Because that 3.8% Q2 growth rate, that's the shiny object everyone's focusing on.
It is.
It came after a Q1 contraction, minus 0.6%. So yeah, the rebound looked impressive on paper. But we have to ask about the quality of that growth, right?
That's the crucial question. Absolutely.
So the headline number was mainly a fiscal adjustment, maybe a one-time boost from efficiency gains, rather than a sign of, like, booming economic strength.
That seems to be the takeaway.
If we kind of mentally remove that accounting effect for a moment, was there any measurable organic element in that 3.8%, or was it pretty much all that fiscal window dressing?
Well, the sources suggest that any organic strength was pretty minimal and highly concentrated in just a few areas.
Oh.
The consensus view really is that this growth rate just isn't sustainable. And the why is important. It's because the underlying structural headwinds, they're still blowing strong.
What are those headwinds specifically?
We're dealing with continued, even escalating trade tariffs. We've got weak, forward-looking jobs market figures, which I'll get into.
Tighter financial conditions globally, and something the purchasing managers consistently mention, somewhat sticky inflation. Sticky inflation.
Yeah, so all of this points towards a structural weakness, the kind that a temporary fiscal tweak can't really fix long term.
That leads us perfectly, actually, into the labor market. That's usually the clearest health indicator, right?
Typically.
The August jobs report, the last one we really got a clear picture of, was already weak. It showed the economy only added, what, 22,000 jobs?
Yeah, very low.
Which is concerning enough. But now we hit this data black hole. We've had virtually no insight into the jobs market or, frankly, many other key economic indicators for the past 2 months.
Right. And that's because of the continuing government shutdown.
The shutdown. Let's talk about that, because the uncertainty it creates, it seems like potentially one of the biggest and maybe least understood threats right now.
I think that's fair to say. The shutdown has now reached an astonishing 39 days.
39, wow.
Yeah, officially marking it as the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. And it's the sheer length of it that's really the core problem here.
We've obviously seen shutdowns before. They happen. But why is this one creating such a specific and, well, high level of risk for the economy? What's the actual damage mechanism?
It really boils down to the inability to quantify the impact. I mean, think about it. Economic forecasting relies on consistent, reliable data from federal agencies, right? That's how you model risk. Sure, the monthly reports, trade data, housing.
Exactly. Without that information, without the standard monthly reports on trade, housing starts, consumer confidence, employment, all of it, the financial sector, major corporations, they lose their ability to accurately model where the economy is actually headed.
And when banks can't model risk, they get cautious. Extremely cautious. Businesses freeze investments because they literally have no accurate baseline to judge future supply or demand against.
So it's the unknown factor itself that's corrosive.
Precisely. It forces this massive kind of invisible brake onto investment and hiring decisions simply out of fear of what they don't know.
Okay, so it sounds like the shutdown is basically injecting this high dose of unpredictable volatility into an economy that was already, frankly, burdened by tariffs.
That's a good way to put it.
So with the macro picture murky, the government situation unprecedentedly uncertain. But let's zoom in. How are actual businesses, on the ground dealing with all this pressure?
Yeah, let's shift from the macro theories to the ground level reality, and maybe focus first on this crucial issue of cost increases and just the struggle companies are having adapting.
Okay. Where do we see that?
Well, the machinery industry gives us a really striking example. It seems like a classic case of policy having unintended consequences.
Their purchasing managers are reporting that tariffs are having a, quote, massive impact. And here's why. The specialized products they rely on are simply, quote, not readily manufactured in the U.S. So the push to reshore or source domestically,
It's just not working for them. According to these managers, those attempts have been completely unsuccessful.
which directly challenges the stated goals of the trade policy then.
Absolutely. If these imported products are highly specialized and domestic manufacturing can't just, step up immediately to fill that need, then the tariffs effectively just become a tax on American businesses.
Right.
And the quotes show that their overall prices have soared in some cases significantly. These businesses are fighting just to manage, quote, wild fluctuations, trying to pass costs along without completely killing demand.
And I imagine that strain just immediately ripples through the supply chain.
It does, and it often gets amplified by geopolitical reciprocity. Like, look at the transportation equipment sector, specifically the commercial vehicle market,
Yeah.
CVs, trucks.
Okay, what's happening there?
We're seeing a major slowdown. Customers are delaying purchases because of high prices and, again, that extreme demand uncertainty.
Is that just domestic, or is the trade stuff hitting here too?
Oh, it's definitely hitting here, too. This isn't just a domestic issue. It's like the trade war is coming back as a logistical punch.
How so?
The sources make it really clear that U.S. trade policy has led to, quote, reciprocal actions by China, and that's having a material impact.
What kind of actions?
We're talking specific moves like China imposing export controls on things like rare earths and semiconductors.
Oof, critical components.
Exactly. And alongside that, restrictions on certain ocean freight carriers. So you have this dual pressure causing, quote, a lot of stress in supply lines.
So for the average person listening, even if you're not buying a semi-truck, you're probably still paying for this logistical mess somehow, right? On everything on the shelf.
Well, yeah, the cost and the delay of moving goods through that stressed supply chain, it ultimately hits the final price tag somewhere.
And the CV market itself is already bracing for more.
It seems so. There's another round of tariffs specifically targeting commercial vehicles scheduled to kick in on November 1st. So it's just compounding pressure on top of existing stress.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. What about weakening demand itself? Are new orders drying up?
That seems to be another clear theme. The chemical products sector offers two distinct voices here, both showing dwindling confidence.
Okay. One manager noted their outlook has really shifted. The quote was, "Wonder has turned to concern." That doesn't sound good.
No. Orders are down across most of their divisions, and as a direct result, they've already lowered their financial expectations for 2025.
Wow. When a sector like chemical manufacturing starts lowering long-term expectations,
Mhm.
I mean, they supply so many other industries, that suggests they see a pretty long, tough road ahead.
It does. And, what are their customers telling them? The second source we have from chemical products provides that piece of the puzzle. They note that business remains difficult because customers are actively canceling and reducing orders. And the reasons they cite: global economic uncertainty, and specifically the, quote, ever-changing tariff landscape.
So that constant instability, the not knowing what happens next with tariffs, is enough to just freeze long-term investment.
Which translates directly into fewer orders for those primary inputs, yeah.
Is that hesitation mirrored elsewhere, like, say, in the petroleum sector?
Completely mirrored, they're reporting a noticeable decrease in domestic demand for finished products.
And what's the physical result of that? What does that look like on the ground?
It means slower manufacturing operations and, maybe critically, an increase of raw material just sitting there in inventory, piling up.
Yeah, when raw material piles up, that's a really tangible sign. It means manufacturers just don't have confidence in immediate future sales. It signals a kind of profound pause in the economic engine.
Mm-hmm. And what's perhaps most concerning reading through all these reports is that the strain isn't just limited to these heavy industrial goods sectors.
It's broader.
Much broader than you might expect, yeah. The miscellaneous manufacturing sector reports that pretty much across the board, business is, quote, really strained.
Okay.
They note that money is, quote, sitting tighter, and that geopolitical changes are adding significant risk to their projections. And here's a detail that really stood out to me.
What's that?
They specifically note that, quote, even medical fields are feeling the pressure.
Medical fields.
Yeah.
That is surprising. Why would that be? Healthcare is usually considered pretty resilient, maybe even counter-cyclical.
That's what's alarming. It usually is. The sources seem to imply it's tied back to global sourcing and the cost structure again.
Ah, so if tariffs are making specialized components for complex medical equipment more expensive.
Or if the general lack of predictable freight and logistics, maybe due to those reciprocal actions we talked about, is slowing down the delivery of critical, even life-saving products.
Right. That translates to higher operating costs and increased risk, even in fields where the underlying demand should be constant.
Exactly right. It just demonstrates how tariffs and trade friction aren't these neat, isolated policy effects. They really permeate throughout the whole economy.
Yeah.
I mean, even the food, beverage, and tobacco products sector, where you might expect some resilience, they highlight this difficulty too.
What do they say?
They noted that commodity volatility has actually tempered a bit recently, which they attribute mostly to better weather conditions, an outside factor.
Okay, bit of relief there.
But they immediately pivot right back to policy. They state that tariffs continue to remain, quote, difficult to quantify, manage, and deal with in general, and that it's eating into their day-to-day profitability and their long-term planning.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize all this data then. We started with that Q2 rebound, which seems driven mainly by temporary government cuts.
Right.
But pretty much every other fundamental indicator we've just reviewed, the ongoing tariffs, the supply chain stress, the paralyzed jobs data because of the shutdown, the weak new orders across multiple sectors, it all seems to point towards contraction or at least significant strain.
Yeah, stepping back, what does this collection of reports tell us about the overall sort of structural health of the industrial economy? The consensus drawn from all these managers, all these different sectors, it's pretty stark and clear. It centers around three critical observations.
Okay, what are they?
First, prices remain persistently high. That's point one. And it's largely attributed again and again to the tariff structure.
Got it. High prices due to tariffs.
Second, new orders are weakening across these sectors. There's a clear, documented declining trend in overall production levels being reported.
Weakening orders, declining production. Okay.
And third, maybe inevitably, these pressures are already resulting in reported weaker employment within the industrial sector itself.
Okay, so high prices, weak orders, and now weaker employment in industry.
That's the picture emerging.
So the combined weight of all these factors, the sticky costs, the trade war backlash, fewer new orders, plus the high uncertainty from this record-long shutdown, the sources suggest this is expected to have a, what was the phrase, notable impact on the overall U.S. economy.
That's the term they use, notable impact. And while the structural problems seem absolutely clear now, the sources do leave us with this final cautionary note.
Which is?
The speed and the precise size of the ultimate consequences. Still very difficult to predict. Which, brings us right back to that really unsettling element of the unquantifiable unknown, especially with the shutdown ongoing.
Right. So just to recap for everyone listening, we looked past that single 3.8% GDP number to try and grasp the systemic weight of these simultaneous pressures. You've got tariffs, tight money, and this black hole of uncertainty introduced by the record-setting government shutdown. Think about it. If the industrial sector, the engine of the physical economy, is actively lowering its financial expectations, if it's struggling with unsuccessful reshoring attempts, dealing with reciprocal geopolitical actions like China restricting rare earth exports. And, on top of all that, the government shutdown means we can't even properly measure the immediate economic effects. The question is, what domestic sector is currently stable enough and strong enough to counteract all those simultaneous major pressures? And maybe more importantly, for how long can any sector possibly hold up the entire economy under that kind of combined weight? That is the macro question, born directly from all those specific strains identified by the people actually running these industries. A lot to think about. That's all the time we have.
Thank you for joining us for this crucial update.
See you next time.